me see. I'm going to move some of this stuff so that I don't throw it on the floor. Well, as Betty said, my name is Roger Outler, and among other things, I'm the associate pastor of Louisville Farmdale Church. And I came to Louisville after pastoring up in northern Indiana, northern Illinois for a number of years. Came here to go to the Baptist Seminary, working a PhD in preaching. And in fact, the first Sunday, I was just sitting there thinking, the first Sunday that we were here, we live in Clarksville, and first Sunday we were at New Albany First Church. The pastor at that time, Bob Muncie, was a friend of mine from seminary, and he wasn't here. And he was supposed to be at my church in Illinois. I had a schedule for revival that weekend, and then in the intervening time, he canceled his revival. I ended up moving to Louisville, and thought, well, we'll go see Bob and Jane. And he was holding revival for somebody else. Somebody had a last-minute cancellation, and they were filling in. So I never let him live that down. But I have some good memories of our first days here in Louisville. Thought we'd be here 5 or 6 years while I worked on my dissertation. God had other plans, brought me to Louisville. I ended up getting a Master of Divinity, but never going on to the PhD. I got called to pastor a church in downtown Louisville, which I did for 10.5 years. And we thought we'd be here 5 or 6 years, and it's been 27. So God knows what He's doing. But we love it in this area, and appreciate you asking me to come and fill the pulpit this morning. I'm going to look at Acts chapter 13. And as the years have passed, I find that I have a little bit more trouble seeing. And I have my large print Bible, but I'm not sure how well that's going to work for me this morning. Acts chapter 13, we'll begin reading verse 13. From Paphos, Paul and his companions sailed to Perga in Pamphylia, where John left them to return to Jerusalem. From Perga, they went on to Pisidian Antioch. On the Sabbath, they entered the synagogue and sat down. After the reading from the law and the prophets, the synagogue ruler sent word to them, saying, "Brothers, if you have a message of encouragement for the people, please speak." Standing up, Paul motioned with his hand and said, "Men of Israel, and you Gentiles who worship God, listen to me." Down to verse 32. We tell you the good news. What God promised our fathers, He has fulfilled for us, their children, by raising up Jesus. As is written in the second Psalm, "You are my son. Today I become your father." The fact that God raised Him from the dead, never to decay, is stated in these words. "I will give you the holy and sure blessings promised to David." So it's stated elsewhere, "You will not let your Holy One see decay." For when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. He was buried with his fathers, and his body decayed. But the one whom God raised from the dead did not see decay. Therefore, my brothers, I want you to know that through Jesus, the forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. Through Him, everyone who believes is justified from everything you could not be justified from by the law of Moses. Take care that what the prophets have said does not happen to you. Look, you scoffers, wonder and perish. For I'm going to do something in your days that you would never believe, even if someone told you. That's a strong message, a strong condemnation of the scoffers, and yet an encouragement to God's people. We live in a very stress-filled society today. The problems and pressures of contemporary life surround us, and it's easy to become overwhelmed. What we need is the very thing that the elders asked Paul as he spoke. He said, "Brothers, if you have a message of encouragement for the people, please speak." Verse 15. I think we need encouragement.
Amen.
And we can learn the positive example from God, the master encourager. There's a legend told of the devil auctioning off some of his tools. Kind of doing spring cleaning kind of deal. And when the buyers assembled, there was one odd-shaped tool that was marked not for sale, sitting over in a corner. And when he was asked to explain, the devil said, I can't afford to let that one go. I'll let some of these other tools, but not that one. It's the most useful one I have. It's called discouragement. And with it, I can work my way into the hearts of those that are otherwise untouchable. When I get this tool into a man's heart, the way is open to plant anything there that I may desire. People need encouragement. And I want to encourage us today, urge us today, to become encouragers. People need to hear the good news. God's still on the throne. He's still transforming lives. His word is still true. We can still count on him to keep his promises. The people of the world may never have heard of John or Charles Wesley if it hadn't been for their mother, Susanna, who was an encourager. A young boy was told at his first voice lesson he would never amount to much, but his mother encouraged him. And he grew up to be Enrico Caruso, one of the greatest tenors of all time. Henry Ford was ready to give up hope of ever building a gas-driven engine until he ran into, everyone laughed at him because electric cars were the way of the future. And then Thomas Edison met him at a party and told Ford he was right and urged him to go on and pursue his dream, which obviously he did. Adam Clark might never become the great Bible scholar that he became if it hadn't been for someone to see his potential and encourage him. Sir Walter Scott was considered the class dunce until he met the poet Robert Burns, who changed the course of Scott's life with his words of encouragement. Back about 40 years ago, I was preaching in a seminary class in Kansas City. They would have two of us stand up to preach, and as the one would preach, the class would be listening and taking notes and making their critiques. And then after we both preached, one would go in the back, and they would critique the one that was left, and then we'd trade places. And as you went in the back, there was a video, and you could watch yourself on film. I hate to do that. But I was preaching with a guy named Richard Parrott, who, his father, Leslie Parrott, was the president of Olivet for many, many years, and probably one of the finest pulpiteers that we've had in the Church of the Nazarene, in my lifetime anyway. And Richard is a great preacher. He was then as a seminary student and has gone on to great things. But I remember as I came back to get my critique from the class, they all had their say, you know, and then the professor, whose name just went out of my mind just like that, but he kind of waited till everybody got their say, and then he said, Mr. Outler, he said, I have been preaching for 40 years and teaching here at the seminary, and that has got to be one of the finest presentations I've ever heard. I gave you an A+. Well, all right. And then the other shoe dropped. If you could just manage to say something when you preach. Ouch. But obviously it made an impression on me. And those words of encouragement told me, you've got the raw materials. Now develop them. And every time I step into a pulpit, I think of those words. Something worth saying. What a difference encouragement can bring. And Paul has a word of encouragement for us in this passage. He gives us some reasons to be encouraged, even in the darkest days, even in this strange era that we live, that many have called a post-Christian America. And all of those words of encouragement in this passage are based on the trustworthiness of the God that we serve. The first thing I see is in verse 32. We tell you the good news. What God promised our fathers, He's fulfilled for us, their children. God keeps His promises. That's a pretty good encouraging word. Yeah. God keeps His promises. Unlike some people, if God makes a promise, you can be sure He's going to fulfill it. Amen. I remember just a few years into my ministry, I was in a very time-pressured time in my ministry. I was pastoring the church and was involved in the district and had a lot of things going on in my life, and trying to keep all the balls up in the air. One of my parishioners came to me one Sunday, and he'd had some things going on in his life. And he said, "You let me down. I needed you to be my pastor in this situation that he named, and you let me down. And if there was anybody in the church that I would want to have helped and to support, it was this man. I made certain promises to my congregation, and I failed this man. Failed him miserably. Didn't keep my promise. But God always keeps His promises." Amen. We look back at the Old Testament and the covenants that God made. He made a covenant with Noah that He'd never destroy. He made a promise that He'd never destroy the world by water again. He promised Abraham that he would become, although he had no children, his descendants would number as many as the stars of the sky and the sands on the shore. He told David that he not only would serve as king of Israel, but there would always be someone on his throne. That a descendant of David would always reign. He kept His promises. As early as, I was just reading this morning, Genesis 3:15. If I can pull it up here. 3:15, it says, when God is talking to the serpent, He says, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." He's talking about Messiah. In Genesis 3:15, God makes a promise that He's going to send the seed of a woman that will take on the serpent and overcome him. Amen. Isaiah spoke of the branch out of the stump of Jesse, David's family. He said the descendant of David would come and be the Messiah. 700 years before Bethlehem, God made a promise that was fulfilled in that stable. He did exactly what He said He'd do. When God said in Isaiah 41:10, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be discouraged or dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." That's some, you take it to the bank. What a great promise that is. That's for us. Amen. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my right hand. Later in Jeremiah 29:11, one of my favorite verses. "For I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." Over in Isaiah 43. Forgot to mark this one. Isaiah 43. "But now this is what the Lord says." Here's God's promise. "He who created you, O Jacob, He who formed you, O Israel, fear not." That's a pretty good start. "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I've summoned you by name. You are mine." The Old Testament teaches us names are important. He said, "I called you by name. I know who you are." When you pass through the waters, I'll be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, you'll not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. It doesn't say he's going to deliver us out of the troubles, but he said, I'll be with you. I'll be walking with you through the waters. I'll be there to walk with you through the fire. Amen. When it seems like your life is falling apart, I'll be there. I won't leave you. We need those words of encouragement, especially when those rough times come, and they will. A verse that has come to mean a lot to me in this new year are God's words to Joshua in Joshua 1:9. Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Right now, my life is kind of a state of flux and change. I've anticipated since Christmas time that my life was going to change. A lot of things are going on in my life. I won't go into the details. But that's God's promise. Things are in uproar. It seems like we have more questions than answers. But don't be discouraged. Hang in there. I will be with you wherever you go. That's God's promise. You can take that to the bank. God keeps his promises. If you hear nothing else this morning, hear that and take it with you. God keeps his promises. Amen. When you hear and you read in God's word of a promise, you can count on it. The second thing we can be encouraged about, Paul says, this message of salvation. Verse 26. Brothers, children of Abraham, and you God-fearing Gentiles, it is to us that the message of salvation has been sent. God still saves from sin. God still transforms lives. God still fixes broken people. And all of us are broken people. All of us need him mending by his Spirit. Jesus died in a travesty of justice. I was just reading in preparation for the coming Easter season of the trial before Caiaphas and Annas and Pilate. They broke so many rules. They were not to have a trial at night, and yet he stood before Annas and Caiaphas at night. It was only in the early hours of the morning, probably between 6 or 7 in the morning, that they actually condemned him to death. Keeping the letter of the law, if not the spirit. He came in a travesty of justice and gave up his life. They didn't take it from him. Pilate says, don't you know I have the power to kill you, to have you executed? And Jesus said, no, you don't. His life was not taken from him. He gave it up voluntarily. Because he loves us so much. That's the message. Jesus is still alive. Amen. And because of that, we can have peace. The peace of God that transcends all understanding. That's another great verse from Philippians 4:7. That encourages me. Because he's provided me that peace. Not delivering me out of the storm, but his peace in the storm. For he himself is our peace, Paul wrote to the Ephesians, who has made the two one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility. He said, in Christ there's no slave or free. There's no Jew or Gentile. Gentile or Jew. He said he tore down the dividing wall of hostility. He said, we're all in this thing together. We've all been given the message of salvation. It's for all mankind. When God told Abraham, the world will be blessed through your seed, little could Abraham have conceived what God had planned. The old gospel song says, sing above the battle strife. Jesus saves. Jesus saves. By his death and endless life, Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Sing softly through the gloom when the heart for mercy craves. Sing in triumph o'er the tomb. Our Jesus saves. Jesus saves. Those are words of encouragement. He forgives sin. He provides eternal life. He was resurrected and given a new body. And we have been given that same promise. One day we'll be given a new body. I'm looking forward to that. Amen. I'll be able to throw away my glasses. I have 22/50 vision. I'll be able to throw away my hearing aid and be able to hear out of my left ear again. Amen. I'll be able to run and not have to worry about the arthritis in my knees and my back. Amen. I'm going to get a new body. This one I'm pretty much worn out. That's all part of the salvation message. And then there's the proclamation of forgiveness in verse 38. Therefore, brothers, I want you to know that through Jesus, the forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. We are forgiven. Amen. On the Day of Atonement, the Jewish high priest would first of all go through a whole ritual cleansing of himself. Put on special clothes just to go into the Holy of Holies. He only went in one day a year on the Day of Atonement. He would make a sacrifice for his own sins and then make a sacrifice for the sins of the people of Israel. And go into the presence of God in the Holy of Holies. They would take it, and no one else but the high priest could go in there. And only on that one day a year. They would take and they put bells on the lower hem of his garment, so they could, as long as they knew the bells were ringing, then they knew he was safe. They'd tie a rope around his ankle because no one else could go in there. So if God would strike him down, they'd be able to pull him out by that rope around his ankle. They took it very seriously, the high priest going into the Holy of Holies. But then Jesus came, and he changed everything. The writer of the Hebrews says, unlike the other high priest, he doesn't need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins, then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. Jesus offers something better than the law. It's better than a list of rules. That's something that I needed to hear. I have a very prescriptive personality. I grew up in the Church of the Nazarene in the 50s and the 60s, a very legalistic time. Friends would say, well, what does your church believe? The Nazarenes were only about 300,000 members at that time, back in the 50s and 60s. Around the world, and I grew up in a very Catholic neighborhood and, had untold hundreds of millions of people around the world were Catholic. That was kind of a general understood in my neighborhood. But what were Nazarenes? First of all, they weren't sure whether to trust me as a Protestant, but what's a Nazarene? And I'd say, well, we don't smoke, we don't chew, we don't dance with girls who do. It was all those negative things. Yeah, catch up with me. It was all those negative things. All the things we don't do. Then as a young person, as I was studying God's Word, I realized there are a whole lot more do's and positive things in the Bible. We've been taught all this negativism, all this legalism. And that fed into me, because I'm very prescriptive. Yeah? Give me the rules, show me the boundaries, and I won't put a big toe over the boundary. That's how I'm wired. But Jesus comes along and he says, it's not just a list of laws. The Pharisees had 600 laws that they made out of the 10 Commandments. And Jesus came along and said, well, basically, the rules are love God with all you got and love your neighbor as yourself. That pretty much covers it. There are a lot more do's, a whole lot more positive in the gospel. It's more than just a list of rules. We don't need more rules. People need to know, how are we going to get out of the mess we're in? He's got the answer. He is the answer. People need hope for tomorrow because we are surrounded by hopelessness. And Jesus is that hope. We have a message of hope. We have a message of encouragement for people. We need to share it. Yes, man is a sinner. Yes, man is beyond hope without God. Our future is bleak. Life lacks meaning without God. But when you bring Him into the equation, now there's hope. Now there's a future. Now there's meaning. That's a message that we can share with our world. Encouragement is a wonderful thing. We all need encouragement at some time or another. All of us. Even the most positive person. We can become overwhelmed by the stress of our day. We face problems. You ever get a problem today? Wait. It's waiting for you down the road. If not tomorrow, next week, it's coming. We deal with problems. We deal with trouble. We need an uplift, a positive word from God, the master encourager. We have to remember, God keeps His promises. Amen. Satan tried to tell Adam and Eve in the garden, even then, God doesn't really care. God's got a hidden agenda. When the truth is, God's agenda is out there. He loves us unconditionally. And He keeps the promises He makes. He promises final salvation. He promises resurrection. He promises forgiveness and forgetfulness about sin. That was a great promise. That was a great thing for me to learn as a young person. God not only forgives me, but He forgets. You see, I went to Him after He'd already forgiven me. And I said, but God, what about this? He goes, I specifically remember forgetting that. God doesn't have a bad memory. He chooses not to hold those things against us. He not only forgives us, but He forgets, doesn't hold it against us. He promises more than a list of rules. He promises Himself. I'm trying to learn to be the man of God. Not just do godly things, but to be a man after God's own heart. You know, we're called human beings, not human doings. I need to be a man of God. That's my hope. That's my message of encouragement. We live in a sin-discouraged world, and it seems it's getting darker all the time, and people are becoming more and more antagonistic toward the gospel. But we have a message of hope. We have a message of light in the darkness. Helping people get beyond the rules to the Savior behind the rules. God offers us Himself. That's pretty encouraging. Amen. We don't need more rules. We got enough spiritual baggage that we're carrying. Spiritual and emotional baggage. What we need, what the world desperately needs, is to be told about a Savior who cares about us completely, who loves us unconditionally. What is a witness but somebody who tells what happened? You know, over the years I've had people say, well, I don't know how to be a witness. I don't know how to testify to people. Well, basically, it's very simple. Where was I before? How am I now? And how did I get here? That's all a witness does, is tell what happened. I can do that. Tell my story. Because my story interweaves with His story operating in my life. That's pretty cool. Dr. C. Neil Strait was a DS for a number of years and a prolific writer in the church as a young person growing up. And he wrote this: you and I can join the encouragement revolution. There's someone waiting to hear a word from you and me that will lift their spirits, ignite. Then we'll know we have one characteristic in ministry of which the world never tires, and for which there will always be a need. I want to challenge us to be people of encouragement.
Amen.
We have the message for the world they desperately need. We have the good news, and it is good news. It is great news. God's still on the throne. God loves us unconditionally. Doesn't matter what we do. God loves us. He doesn't like some of the things we do sometimes. He doesn't like some of the attitudes we project. But he loves us. Loved us enough that I'm truly convinced that if I was the only one that needed Calvary, Jesus still would have come.
Amen.
His blood would still be shed for my sins. The good news is it's for all men. Doesn't matter how nice we are. Doesn't matter what color our skin is or what culture we come from or what language we speak. God loves me unconditionally. And he died for each of our sins. He died for the world, but he died for us as individuals.
Amen.
All we have to do is accept that free gift. That's the message we have to share with the world. That's the encouragement we can offer. There's hope in Jesus. And he's still as involved today as he's ever been. And we need him desperately. Let's be encouragers for the Master.